Hi, welcome to the Strathclyde Inspire highlight video for 2021 to 2022. It's been a great year, with many inspiring conversations involving some amazing entrepreneurial minds. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy some of our favorite clips from this past year.
Yeah, really fascinating, I guess, in terms of your background, both academically, but also in terms of delivery and, I guess even thinking about legacy and what that means within the context of innovation and enterprise, here in Glasgow, where I guess we've got a strong history, being at University of Strathclyde, thinking about some of the great innovators that have come through these doors and continue to come through these doors, but I guess how we build on that legacy and how we impact the communities that surround us here in Glasgow. Some of the most deprived communities in Scotland are not a stone throw away from our institutions and from the areas in which we live. And I guess, what role do you think innovation has in tackling some of those societal disparities that we see?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think when we look at research programs and I think how they're structured, I actually think whether you're a company or representing almost like a microcosm of society or any sort of organization, or whether you are a local authority looking at how you tackle challenges on the ground, I think increasingly we now need almost like a sort of North Star vision, or we need to base what we're trying to do on sort of societal challenges rather than research questions. So I think we almost sort of need to sort of think more broadly, okay, what is the challenge that we're trying to fix? And who are the diverse minds that we need to get together to sort of fix that? So I don't think we can be as linear as we have been in the past. And we've often sort of thought, I guess, about, sectors, sort of individual sectors. I'm not entirely sure how helpful that is. I wonder if we need to think about, again, what are the real life challenges that we're trying to fix? And, and how do we sort of use our rich innovation assets? Because somewhere like Glasgow, we're so lucky. We've got so many skills and innovation assets within a relatively small geography. So how do we coordinate those and in a sort of coherent way and a really impactful way, whereby we can take, a sort of challenge-led approach and bring in all the right people to design sort of the transformational solutions that will really have an impact on communities and inclusive shared growth.
Yeah, and I guess you've got quite a unique experience, Susie, having worked, I guess, closely with local authorities, worked with national government, working with academic institutions. What do you see as, I guess, some of the challenges and the opportunities within those relationships to really kind of make, as you said, that transformative societal change? Because I think there's a lot of messing around the edges with things but it's you talked about policy earlier on, like what some of the policy changes you think need to happen to help us kind of move things forward. Like where's some of the, I guess, where's that kind of nexus for you in some of that?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember a few years ago I sat around I sat in a conference and we were discussing similar things, and in terms of the Glasgow context, I don't think we quite realise how lucky we are in terms of the relationships, the tacit relationships between the universities, the town and gown relationships, as we would say, and our connection to kind of local communities. Because actually, that meeting was in Turin, and I remember the Italians kind of saying, "God, you're so lucky," because actually the innovation community doesn't have as good a relationship with its local authority. So we need to capitalise on that. Now, there isn't a silver bullet that will answer that question, but there needs to be systemic and systematic sort of changes to kind of what we have and what we're doing to support communities. And I think that goes from everything from skills, education. Education is obviously absolutely critical to sort of everything, and we need to invest in young people from underrepresented communities who are tackling, are having to, every day they sort of have challenges that they're facing, but we need to invest in those young people. Often it comes down to resource, and I know that's difficult sort of in these times. We need to prioritize resource, but I think education and giving those young people equality of opportunity is absolutely critical to sort of rebalancing.
So what are the biggest challenges you're facing today and how you overcoming them? Because it sounds like you knock them down when they get in your way anyway, but what are you doing about it?
Do you know, it's when you'd give, you'd ask me to have a wee look at some of the questions, and quite often I struggle with challenges because challenges are just, I'm not going to say something cliche that they're there to be jumped over or whatever, but challenges are there to just be jumped over, aren't they? I think that in terms of running a social business, if you like, the challenge is always balancing commercial decisions and social decisions. So you have to think with, I always talk about running a social business as a commercial mind and a social heart. But actually the social thing is what makes it really, really different. So sometimes, like, there'll be decisions I make and they're not commercially the right decision, but actually they are absolutely the right thing for the people that we're working with. So so then there's the challenge is making sure that the investors and the people that are around you and your board respect that and also are on the same page as you, so that you're not being challenged about these things.
Do you have a methodology for that at all, or is it more like kind of you going with your gut in some of these things, or is there like a methodology? So if tomorrow you were kind of hit by a bus, God forbid, would the organisation have a sense of how it would make decisions based on those heart elements that you've somehow embedded in the DNA, or is it very much down to you as a leader that a lot of that happens?
What would happen if I was hit by a bus? I'm going to be careful walking home after you've said that now. You
definitely should die.
So I think, if I think about the way that the senior team, the way that we all work together, I do the head and heart thing in my head just instantaneously. Alice, our Chief Operating Officer, is much more about head. She's much more about what does that mean, and the consequences and setting precedents and what are the financial implications. And then Joey, who's our Head of Lettings and Tenancy Support, is probably a wee bit more about heart.
Okay.
So they would have a debate. But when I think about the different people on my board and our investors, they are in balance.
Okay.
So I think we would probably get to the same decision. And one of the things when I'm making decisions around the social, or we're collectively making decisions about the social side, we always have the finances not very far away, so we can articulate, look, we're going to do this, and this will mean that this might be a reduction in profits of X amount, but we've already thought that through and we can handle it. So it's always very carefully, doing the right thing is always well, we consider it carefully.
As techies, we are always kind of like, we're always looking at what's the next and what's not great and what's best. But I mean, and there's a lot of different changes going on. I mean, there's, we had COP in the city, and I still believe that the city can leverage off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's kind of getting you? What's the next big thing?
Yeah, it's So there's kind of two sides to me in this, right?
Yeah.
And one is the pure techie side. So I'm endlessly interested in new stuff. And it can be absolutely useless stuff, but I love it. Right, so it's the gallium nitride chargers. I don't know, you see these things now. So I remember you'd buy a laptop, you had a charger, it was like a brick. It was bigger, it weighed more than a brick. And it was that. Now you get these wee things that are like 2 inches square, and that's the same power. So there's a whole heap of stuff like that. But I think I'm wise enough now to realise that's sort of some self-gratification, you know what I mean? It's okay. Nobody wants to hear about that. The thing that is constantly on my mind just now, and probably has been since we started Data Lab, is AI, and how that's starting to impact the very fabric of our society. So there's these things that. There's things that interest me because they're shiny baubles, right? And I know that that's the case. This thing interests me because it is in the process of changing the world, and it's not clear how it's going to work. Now, let's see how it's going to work. It's not clear to me we're heading for a good place or a bad place.
Yeah, okay.
But we're at a really interesting point in human history, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, I when I first started programming, my gran used to ask me, "What is it you do, son?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh." And I actually tried to show her one day, right? And so Visual Studio would come up. That was a C++ program at the time. It's like, wait till you see this, gran. She's like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, you can add two numbers together, brilliant." So, but you know, and then I said, "No, right, I've got to break this down in human terms." So what did I do on a human level?
Yes, yeah.
Well, I went and sat with people who did a job. I tried to understand how they did their job. Then I got the computer to do their job, and they get made redundant. Okay, the nice way of saying that is they got other more interesting jobs.
Yes, yeah.
Debatable.
Yeah.
But that's what we did. Now, when I was at the start of my career, I could say that with some sense of arrogance and pride and bravado. But now when I look at it, I think, right, okay, you know, self-driving cars, okay, you know, within the next decade, let's say 10 years, okay, is it beyond the realms of possibility that you'll be able to have a fully autonomous car? No, I would say it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Maybe unlikely for full autonomous, but I don't think we're that far away. But what's the impact to society? How many households in the Glasgow area rely on a taxi driver as the main breadwinner? I don't know, but I suspect if it was a single employer and that employer was at risk of a cataclysmic failure, the government would do something about it. And that's just one microcosm of it. So you're seeing this artificial intelligence data as a commodity, as probably the most precious commodity that we've ever came across. How that is starting to affect things, how it's starting to affect our democracy, which is in real jeopardy, there's no doubt about that. How it's starting to affect the jobs market. You know, what happens if you end up with this class of people who are, from an economic perspective, not just exploited, but irrelevant, entirely irrelevant. Doesn't matter. And so, you know, it excites me, terrifies me. The thing that's on my mind just now is AI, and I'm always intrigued by this, the word innovation, right? So there's a great definition. I think it's the Harvard Business Review do this. The definition of innovation is new stuff made useful, right? And newness and usefulness are relative terms, right? New to me, not new to you. Useful, right? So relative. But when you actually start to unpick that useful bit, what you really get to is impactful. New and impactful, I suspect, is probably a slightly better definition. And the technology that will have the biggest impact on us, for the rest of our lives, our children, their children, and everybody else's for the next 200, 300 years is going to be AI.
And that's something which, again, though, like we as technologists, we're creating that. And the thing is, we've got to have, I would say, that ethics aspect into it, because it is going to affect quite a lot of people, and in some ways it can't get out of hand. It has to be kind of you know, supporting the people who are.
And I think that's an interesting place for entrepreneurs to be.
I don't know if you're a big fan of TV, but one of my favourite shows is one called *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Absolutely.
And obviously, for people who haven't seen it, it's basically about the dawn of the computer age, and a lot of what you talked about there are characters in that show. And so I guess my question for you is, like, what was the energy like around that time? Because I guess for many of us, we've grown up now as digital natives, and it's just second nature. But when you watch something like that dramatised as it is, obviously the energy and just, there's a lot of just like really audacious, like, people just go for it, don't they?
No, in fact, *Halt and Catch Fire* is a kind of a bit of an inspiration for me, because it covers that whole period when the personal computer was born, 81 through to about mid-90s, when things were pretty much settled. We knew what was, you know, obviously things have advanced since then, but not new breakthroughs, not new ways of doing stuff. And in fact, I've actually written a book, which will be coming out later this year. Basically around our web technology business and how we built that. But really, it covers that period. the golden age of the personal computer when it arrived. And the Halt and Catch Fire was a great example. The first thing they did was an IBM PC clone, and then they did a word processor, and then they did a hypertext product. Slightly weird. And then finally they did a multiplayer gaming system. And it was the same people every time trying, and they never worked. They never succeeded.
Yeah.
But they struggled to make it. And all the people in there are very recognisable.
Do you think those people are shaped by their environment? Is it kind of like nature versus nurture? So, is there a pattern, do you think, for this, or is there something out there? Like you talked about the ecosystem. So is the ecosystem helping us to deliver those social entrepreneurs, or are they just made? Are they born and they just need a vehicle to get their idea out there?
Nature nurture is something that I've not really looked into that, and I don't fully understand it. But what I think is that, just in the way we were talking about what I did at the beginning, and how I started and how I ended up in social enterprise, I think it's life experiences that shape you.
Yeah.
So, how have I ended up? So to start a business, you have to have confidence, and you have to be a bit of a risk taker. There are a number that you have to be a self-starter. There's all these different ingredients. Where do they come from? So for me, one of the earliest things that I did as a young teenager or as a teenager was I went to Spain on my own when I was 17 for 3 months, and I didn't really speak Spanish. I'd done first year here at Strathclyde. Didn't really go to any of the lectures, did a crash course in Spanish.
Right.
But I got to Barcelona and I thought, I can't string 2 words together here. And then also had the added joy that they didn't even speak Spanish in the family, it was Catalan, so I had to learn. But I thought, okay, I need to learn both languages at the one time. That was my response to that, which looking back at 17 years old, I look back at what I did then and think, God, I wouldn't have the courage to do that now. But I came back from Barcelona after 11 weeks, completely fluent in Spanish, completely fluent, and really understanding Catalan well. And that gave me complete self-belief that I could learn how to do new things. So actually setting up a business that in an area that I'd never done anything before didn't seem like a big deal, because I'd proven to myself already that I could do new things, which is go and live alone in another country and learn a new language from scratch. So I think I don't think it is about you're born an entrepreneur, but I think your life experiences and your environment does shape you.
Yeah.
I just admire what you've done in very difficult circumstances. Often we talk about don't waste a crisis. My goodness, Claire, you have not wasted a crisis.
Sorry, John, I'm speaking over you there. But actually, when I presented my recovery strategy, that was my first quote: was "Don't waste a crisis," because otherwise you can either just sit and wait for it to pass and it might be okay, or my absolute philosophy is when something hits you that feels bad or uncomfortable, you are being sent a gift from the universe that is asking you to change or learn. And if you seize that, it can actually be incredibly powerful. And that's what we did with the pandemic.
So you are the curator and founder of TEDx Glasgow. Tell us a bit more about TEDx for those that aren't aware of it. And you probably have been living under a rock if you're not aware of TED. I think probably one of the largest platforms for spreading inspiring ideas. But tell us a bit more about it and what's the future looking like and what's coming up for TEDx.
Oh, well, I've met ministers in Scotland that have never heard of TED.
Is that right?
Yeah. So living under a rock is quite common, more common than you'd think. What happened for me was I had a mentor. I've got several mentors. I recommend you get hundreds of mentors, tens of mentors, whatever, have many. And one of my mentors suggested I watch TED Talks because I like learning about lots of different subjects. And then a year later, the same mentor said to me, well, why do you organize a TEDx event? And I looked at it, it's a complete nightmare. It's like so many rules and processes and, you got to be a volunteer. And then 10 years later, I'm still doing it. So all the characteristics of an entrepreneur I mentioned earlier, naivety and tenacity and grit, short-term memory, are really helpful when you're doing something that, it involves a lot of volunteering time and a lot of people volunteering their time as well. For me, the TED platform is a space for ideas sharing, but TEDx is a space for ideas doing.
Okay.
That's the big difference. So
Yeah,
TED is, 6 billion views, sharing ideas, inspiring folk. So what?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You'll be inspired by this podcast, hopefully, and then you walk out and you do whatever you want to do before you heard the podcast.
Yeah.
Your life will continue as it did. So for us, in particular at TEDx Glasgow, it's ideas worth doing. Is more important than ideas worth sharing. And that's how we've built the last decade. But if you look at it, the investment that we've had from government and the private sector, and it's probably 90% private sector and 10% government, we give a return of nearly double the money that's invested in social, economic, and environmental impact. Therefore, you'd think with the 18 million views that we've had online of the people that we've engaged with the talks from over 140 speakers, and a lot of them are Scottish relevant ideas or from Scotland ideas, you'd think that we'd have, the red carpet rolled out and massive support from government, because brand Scotland needs it. Scots have a great brand around the world, but there's a lot of countries competing. Berlin, Silicon Valley, there's Amsterdam, there's lots of other countries that compete and cities that compete with Scotland. So I believe that TED as a brand and a platform, and TEDx as a way of actioning people, could be hugely influential in Scotland, and as Scotland would be seen globally. We're more than whiskey, haggis, and shipbuilding. We've got a lot more things to showcase around the world. However, I'm just one of a handful of people that believe that. I don't know why government doesn't get behind it more, and I hope they would. We have a 2030 plan. We would love to be eventually in the hydro. We'd love to live stream globally. We'd love to showcase more of Scotland's ideas and engage the Scottish diaspora. I don't know how many millions around the world. That would be incredible and change the mindset of Scotland and the image of Scotland globally. But that's an aspiration that a handful of us have. What we really need is government to get behind it.
And I guess I want to ask you about your purpose, because it sounds like you've been on a journey, you've experienced lots of things, you've had lots of businesses. But what do you now think, looking ahead in the next 20 years, what's your purpose, Gurjit?
That's a great question. So my purpose has always been about how to help society at large thrive. Very, very simple. Yeah. And I tried to do that in Mexico. I went there and thought, get to know the locals, get to know the language, the culture, understand how things work and work with them. Don't come top down with solutions. No. Try to understand what changes you can make working with other people there. And that's advice I would give everybody. Don't go into something with the arrogance that you know everything. Go in there as naive as you can and ask all the stupid questions. And then my mum said to me, she said, well, you're doing all that stuff out in Latin America. Why don't you do it in your doorstep? Why do you do it in your back garden, your neighborhood? And that's what brought me back to Glasgow, the opportunity to actually do things here. The next 20 years for me, I think it's about trying to help others succeed. And that's probably what I've been doing the last 10 years. Finding amazing people and giving them the ability to share their ideas and drive action using the TED platform. I love what I do, and it's very powerful. So I respect it, and it's a lot of responsibility, and I would like to continue doing that, finding incredible people and helping them tell their story so that other people can collaborate rather than compete with them. So from a 20-year perspective, I think that's where I could have the biggest impact and influence. But I also have a young family. I have 2 young kids, so I want to be able to spend a little bit of time with them and help them become better role models in society. So I just need to be careful that I have a balance, which I've not had most of my life. I've always been very extreme in the things I do. But I now need to maybe take a teeny step back. But you say that, and then all of a sudden you're inundated with new initiatives that you do. So for me, the next 20 years is just kind of amplify what I do and scale it up, but then try to keep a little bit of balance for health and mental well-being.
I think that's really good advice. So you're one of Strathclyde's Senior Enterprise Fellows, and great to have you here. you're obviously part of that role is inspiring that next generation of innovators and leaders. Can you tell us a bit more about the role and what excites you about working with the university?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Sir Jim MacDonald is leader here, and he's driving things forward. And he's always been, I mean, I've known him for years, and he's always been very ambitious and trying to create things. He's also president of the Royal Academy of Engineering, which I'm a fellow of. And he's doing good stuff there as well. So he's such a driven person, you know. And it's good to see, you know, we're actually creating pretty much every subject you do at Strathclyde is a vocational. You've got a career ahead.
Our industry engagement and the ability for placements and things, I
Yeah.
think, are pretty much unparalleled in the sector. And I think that's why people come here. That's why students come here, because they know they can get a job at the end of it.
Exactly, that's right. And I mean, I've been involved in Glasgow businesses for years. There's nothing that makes Glasgow any different from anywhere else, really.
No,
It's just as enterprising and just as go ahead. In
The
fact,
people are friendlier. Yeah, the
well,
people are friendlier.
that is actually true. I have to admit that's true. But the whole, you know, Glasgow used to be built half the boats in the world, you know, built all the railway engines, you know, it used to be a massive enterprise business area. And the deindustrialisation of the 20th century didn't do it any favours.
No.
And we need to rebuild now. It's time.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm excited to see what you can do and how you can support the university in that ambition.
I'm interested in given all of the experience, probably a very, very difficult question, but is there one lesson that your current role plus your other roles that everybody should learn at some point? Again, come back to the origin, what we're trying to do with Strathclyde Inspire, whether it's a student, a staff member, alum, what is it that they can do? Because we want to make a difference to society. That's the key. That's what our purpose is as a useful place of useful learning. So is there one thing? Can there be such a thing?
So I think I've probably mentioned them already, and they're sort of wrapped up in my stories. I'm a very authentic, purpose-driven person, so you can kind of hear almost my learnings in my journey. But for me, finding your passion as early as possible is something that I think is really, really important, because if you are passionate about something, you believe in it, then you're going to be good at it. You're going to work hard at it. You're going to stay focused on it. And what that also does is it builds resilience, because I tell you something, aside from my daughter's health and things like that, this job has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And there have been moments where I have sat with my head in my hands. I'm in the Emirates Arena now, in the car park, not knowing how I'm going to walk through the door, and just like, you know, you think you take one step forward and it's 10 back. No one was helping, particularly in those early formative years. It was like every door just got shut. And I was like, how? I'm one woman. I was stressed. I was running these businesses. I was doing it on my own. Nothing was going right. You're panicking about money. And it was just excruciating. But I believed in what I was doing. So that gave me the strength, because I had to do that myself, to keep going and to find those solutions and to push myself through it. And I always, you know, had the kind of Steve Jobs mindset in the back of my head that, like, truly successful people that achieve things at that next level, there's only a few of them, because actually the journey to it is so hard that most people will fall away on the way. And that's okay. Like, it's, if I'd quit this at any point and gone and taken another job somewhere else, no, everyone would have gone, you did a great job, Claire. But if not me now, then who, when? And I knew that it had to be me to drive it at this point. So because I was passionate, I kept myself going and I pushed through it. I think that sentiment, and also when you listen to my journey, and this is something that I really push to women, is back yourself. Like, back yourself. I have talked my way into every job ever. I mean, I talked my way into, you know, getting my first ever job, and it turned out I was good at it. I then hustled, I worked really hard, and I made sure people knew I was good at it. Talked my way into the Glasgow Life job. You know, everything I do, I'm there, but it's not hollow words. I believe I can do it. I can contribute something, and then I get in there. I don't have all the answers. And a lot of the time I figure it out as I go along. But we can't wait for everything to be perfect, and we can't wait or wonder what someone else has got. So if you believe in something and you think you can do it, then just, as nervous as you are, your legs might be shaking, you might be doubting yourself, but just put yourself forward, because once you're in there, your own passion, your own belief will take you where you need to go. Just don't settle because you think it's easy, because it's really being miserable and doing the wrong thing and not being passionate about it. That's not easy. I'd rather work hard and be stressed with something I absolutely love than be in the opposite environment.
Thanks to everyone who has taken the time to listen to our inspiring conversations this year. We really hope you enjoyed and learned from these talks. To find out more about Strathclyde Inspire, visit the University of Strathclyde website or check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time.